Everything has its time and everything dies. That sounds nothing like him. That's embarrassing. Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about The End of the World, written by Russell T Davies and is directed by Eurolin. This is the second story in the first series of the revived era of Doctor Who, starring Christopher Eccleston as the ninth incarnation of the Time Lord, the Doctor, and Billie Piper as new companion Rose Tyler. Now, after the very mundane setting of Rose, Russell T Davies decided to just go straight sci-fi. We have, apart from really the Doctor and Rose, every other character is a creature of some sort. You don't have any other human-looking characters. Well, you do kind of have the trees, I guess, I suppose. Very alien concepts, very futuristic and very detailed with the sci-fi, as it tackles the notion of the sun expanding, destroying the Earth, which is always a big part of like science, you know, like how the world's going to end and stuff. Now, when this story came out, I remember watching this for the first time and thinking, wow, this new series could be really good with Rose, and it could also be really bad with this. I thought it was absolutely horrible when I first watched it, thinking it was very cluttered, it felt very kiddie in a sense, if that made any sense. But over the time, as I've matured, I get to see more stuff that I like about it. And even though I wouldn't say I particularly love this story, I do enjoy it enough that when it's on, I have a fun blast with it. It also deals with some great concepts about the dynamic between Rose and the Doctor, and it has a lot of stuff in it as well. Let's talk about this very small aspect of this story, which becomes heavily important in later episodes. This is the first story which introduces the meme, Bad Wolf. We hear the Mox of Balboon say it at one point. This will introduce the whole story arcs. Now, in the revived series, stories aren't as long as they were in the classic series, in which you had 3 or 4 episodes to tell a story. Whereas here we've only got one 60-minute adventure, roughly the time of half of a 4 or 2-parter in a traditional classic Doctor Who episode, which is really short when you think about it in terms of introducing the characters, the settings, establishing the villain, and all that. So we have to have something that connects these stories together, and the idea of the story arcs comes to mind. Now, as someone who... Actually, I'll tell you what, I'll skip all of that. I'll put that, what I feel about Bad Wolf in Bad Wolf and Parting of the Waves. But, yeah, now this story pays a lot of tribute to other writers, in a sense. It has a murder mystery feel with this very small indoor location, very akin to Agatha Christie novels. It also has, or at least it tries to have, the wit and humour of aliens just not understanding how human culture works, in a similar vein to Douglas Adams. Now, Douglas Adams, despite having passed away years prior, was becoming a huge name in sci-fi in 2005 as the movie The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, one of my favourite movies of all time, was released that year. So sci-fi was on the mind, and also Serenity, the movie to Firefly, that came out in 2005, and the last film in the prequel trilogy of Star Wars. So, you know, 2005 was a great year for sci-fi fans like this idiot right here. But does the story hold up? Does it How good is it? Do I enjoy it because it's my childhood memories and it's nostalgia, or does it actually hold up as a story? Does the influence of Agatha Christie and Douglas Adams pay off in a very well manner, or is it all cluttered and makes no cohesion in terms of tone and structure? Well, we're going to find out now in the narrative section of the video. So the story picks up right after Rose. In fact, this is the first story which is not the first story to have a cold opener, a scene that takes place before the credits start rolling, the opening intro, but it's the first one, it's the first story where this would become a regular thing. And the pre-credit scene, the cold opener basically has like a montage of Rose, and then it leads directly into her going into the TARDIS as the Doctor asks her where does she want to go, the past or the future. And there's a really great scene in which he's basically taunting Rose to go further and further and further into the future, whilst Rose is like, you love showing off, don't you? You think you're so clever. And the Doctor's like, I am clever. I love that line. I love that little bit. And so the Doctor's like, right, I know exactly where to take you, as he pushes the TARDIS further and further and further and further into the future until we get probably one of the great scenes, which I don't think we get a lot of in classic Doctor Who. That wonder of going through those doors and not knowing what to expect. As Rose is trying to ask the Doctor, it's like, where are we? But the Doctor won't say anything. He just puts his hand leading her outwards, and the TARDIS lands on a viewing deck where, when the windows open, she sees the sun seemingly growing in size as the Earth, that seems to be crumbling up, is on its last days. This is the day the Earth expands. This is the day the world goes, gets destroyed, leading into our credits scene, our credit titles. That is just an amazing way to set up a story, and whoever put the idea that the cold openers is a genius. I just love Doctor Who having these cold openers. They set up the story very well, and they also allow us to have just a very tiny cliffhanger, so that it still pays tribute to a sense of classic Doctor Who in that sense, while still being a one-parter. It's also around here that we get introduced to one of the Doctor's newest devices. Although, even though I haven't mentioned it, it has appeared in the War Doctor audio dramas. But this is the first time in like real life that we've seen it, and that is the advent of the psychic paper, a blank piece of paper which, thanks to like psychic connection, the Doctor can make it show as anything, which allows him to avoid awkward questions like, why is he here? Well, he's a guest. He's got identification to say that he's one of the guests of this ship. And then so that's a really cool, massive concept, which actually plays a lot into future stories, not just the 9th Doctor era, but the 10th and the 11th. I can't remember if it's in the 12th. Or even the 13th Doctors, now that I think about it, which is really bizarre. We should have hashtag more psychic paper, please. It cuts through all the questions, you know. As much as I like classic Doctor Who, we do have a lot of scenes in which the Doctor gets caught up in a situation, and the first episode or two is about our characters trying to convince the locals that they are on their side and not just stowaways or pirates or saboteurs or something like that, or spies. Even some of my favourite stories, like the war games, can suffer from this criticism. But this plot element, this psychic paper, allows you to just cut right through and allows for much shorter episodes like this. It's here that we again get introduced to all of these aliens in a fantastic little montage of aliens appearing in the scene. And I love the performances of Christopher Eccleston's just grinning. He's just enjoying every moment of this. And you kind of get the feeling that he's enjoying showing Rose. It's like he likes the feeling of showing someone something new, something that they haven't seen before. That feeling of like, this is weird. He loves that, and he likes that Rose is just like, what the hell? But Rose, on the other hand, is a bit culture shocked by this. She looks around and it doesn't seem to be anything recognisable in a sense. We got the Mox of Alboon, this weird blue creature, which there's this whole thing where the guests give each other gifts, and one of his gifts is that he spits out his bodily fluids into Rose's eye. We also have the inheritance of the repeated mean, these cloaked figures who give all the passengers, including the stewardess, a ball, which was later revealed to hold little spider droids, in a sense. We also have the face of Bo, who doesn't actually have anything to do. He's literally just like a background character. But he becomes very important in canon and later on, especially when we tackle a story in the 10th Doctor era. So that's a very important thing to note. This is the first appearance of the face of Bo, which also, by extension, is the first story with a particular character that we're going to learn later on in the canon of Doctor Who. We also have trees, sentient, human-like trees who have evolved so much from just being these plants that they have become basically physical life, and they are essentially descendants of the trees on Earth. One of them, I believe her name is like Jade, she kind of takes this fancy to the Doctor, and the Doctor also kind of takes a fancy to her, almost as if the Doctor's gearing up for her to also being a companion in a sense. In fact, the Doctor and Rose, despite now the Doctor having a lot more scenes, is still very much like apart from Rose. It's still the back of the ranch storytelling, which is really surprising because these episodes are a lot shorter. You would think that with a shorter runtime, you would want your main characters to be together as much as possible. But no, that's not the case. As Rose runs off in just this whole, just chaos of it all, and she's just shocked by this. There's a fantastic scene which could have easily been cut, I would like to add. It has no bearing in storyline or in the emotional capability of Rose or the Doctor, but it's such a scene that sets up this world so well that I'm so glad they've kept it. It could have easily been cut, and that is when Rose interacts with this plumber character, and we get to learn like these people who are on this ship, the guests, are very privileged to the point where all like the waiters, the stewardess, the workers here have to have permission to speak, which is just mental. So basically, they're basically like really selfish, like business people in a sense. And the Doctor's basically learning of this conspiracy as there's like a shake in the thing, and the Doctor's going around through not the underground, because it's in space, as he's trying to learn more about this ship and how it works. Whilst here, he teams up with Jane, and she's like, and she scanned him, and she's like, I know who you are, and I must say, it's an absolute miracle that you even exist. Heavily implying that something's happened to the Time Lords. In fact, it's at the very end of the story where the word Time Lord becomes, is actually said in the revived series for the first time. It wasn't said at all in Rose, oh wait, no, I tell a lie. The Nestine Consciousness says Time Lord at one point, but it's in the background that you could have easily missed it, but that's beside the point. Rose gets to interact with a character called Cassandra O'Brien, this the supposedly last human, and she has had so much plastic surgery and so much makeup and operations that she's literally just a plastic piece of skin. When I first watched this story, I absolutely hated this character. She is a clear cliche. She is one of those so obviously the bad guy, and she's one of those who's obsessed with herself, and in a sense she's as the doctor puts it down, 10 billion years and it still comes down to money as her motivation is all about her greed and her money, and she basically is trying to pay to make herself look more beautiful, even to the point where Rose, a modern day Earth girl, is just absolutely disgusted by this. It's important to note that Russell T Davies actually based her off real life women who participated in beauty contests by having just huge amount of plastic surgeries and operations to make them look unhealthily thin. And there's a great line Russell T Davies has said about this story, about his influence, and he says that we're basically watching these women kill themselves for our amusement, for our gratification, to try and find beauty and divinity in our appearances. But it's one of those things, and obviously I think the worst thing about the character, which is something I still hold dear, is that she is the only character out of the aliens that has any sort of impact with any other character. Like, it's not going to be the Mox of Balboon, it's not going to be the Face of Bo. She was the only real candidate for the villain, which makes this a very boring mystery story, as right off the get-go, we know who the villain is. We know we don't know why, we don't know how, in a sense. Well, we do know how, because robots, you can just program them, but we know for a fact, straight off the bat, in terms of a viewing audience, that she is the villain, which makes for a very weak villain. However, as I've grown up and matured, and I've seen the world, and like Russell T Davies, I've seen on TV and people I know who have basically gone far beyond to the point of self-harm and getting really unhealthy just for the sakes of looking nice, even though really nobody really cares, and everybody's just obsessed with their own appearances, and it's kind of hideous and ugly and horrifying. I don't think I like the character still, but I think that she's very, and sadly, very relevant character. And she has a lot to say about us as a society, and she's a character I think the new series should bring back. I just realised she's the first recurring new Who villain, because she appears again in the latest story, but I think they should bring her back for more stories, despite her story really concluding, because despite this story being almost more like 16 years old, it's sadly still really relevant. I mean, look at the Kardashians, look at the beauty industry that we have at this moment in this year. It's honestly just bloody disgusting. And watching the story with the context of now, it's just sad how relevant this point really stands. But anyway, another aspect of this story, one which I didn't like to begin with, but now I've praised this story for it, and that is the inclusion of Rose Tyler. As I stated in my previous video talking about the episode Rose, I didn't like Rose as a character there. She was very selfish. She didn't seem like, she seemed like a rebellious kind in terms of the way that she lives her life. But it doesn't seem like her life was bad enough to justify it. Here, on the other hand, we get to see some aspects which is really messed up from the Doctor's point of view. And it's nice to see a character basically like, wait a minute, this entire concept of the Doctor just taking girls and taking them around the universe is kind of messed up. In that scene in which he's talking to that plumber, actually, now that I think about it, I tell a lie, this scene is actually relevant to Rose's character, in which she basically realises, oh God, he's a complete stranger. She doesn't know where he's from, she doesn't even know his real name, and she confronts the Doctor about this. And first of all, the Doctor, just like in the previous episode, is very cheerful about it. He's just like, you know, playing around, like, oh, I'm this cool guy. Oh, yeah, these aliens, I shouldn't have taken you. I'm glad I didn't take you to the Deep South. As Rose comments, it's like making cheap shots about the Deep South and all that. And then we get the scene in which the Doctor basically reveals how she can hear all these aliens speaking English, the translation circuits that gets inside her head. And she's like, wait, what? You put something that gets into my brain and you didn't even bother to ask? And the Doctor's like, I didn't really think about it like that. And you see him kind of crumble away of this personality until he becomes a lot more harder and rougher. And this argument here feels really justified, and I really like this element in which Rose basically tries to ask the Doctor where he's from, who is he? And the Doctor's like, doesn't matter, it's not like you're going to know who I am. This is me, this is now. Doesn't matter about the past, what matters is here and now. Alright? In context, it's mainly just, you know, the Doctor just being like, right, I'm sick of like the war, the Time War. I'm trying to get past it, trying to justify it. He doesn't want to think about Gallifrey. He doesn't want to think about the Time War and how he had to destroy everyone. But now with the inclusion of the War Doctor and retroactively putting that before this story, it's almost as if he, you know, he's trying to turn a new leaf from being the warrior, the man who gave up the identity of the Doctor. But Rose is pushing for answers, which is pushing the Doctor further, and it gets to a point where he just gets up and just stands quietly, as Rose then makes like a subtle joke about like, don't argue with a designated driver, and then we get a nice little bumbly moment with jiggery pokery, in a sense. That's a great little moment. We later then learn that Cassandra is using these spiders to basically infiltrate the base, and was planning on basically becoming like pretending to be a victim and get all the insurance so she can pay for her prosthetics. Like the Doctor says, it all comes down to money. But because her plan failed, because the Doctor revealed who she was, she actually plans now to destroy the ship taking down its shield so that when the sun expands, it will kill everyone on board, as she has a teleporting system that takes her off the ship. The Doctor tries to get to the air ducts with Jade. I can't remember where Rose is at this moment. Where is Rose at this moment? I can't remember. Oh no, I can't remember where Rose is. That's really bad. But the Doctor goes down to the air ducts and Jade has to like hold this thing down, and the Doctor's like, "You're gonna burn, you're gonna die," and she's like, "Just go ahead, just go and save the day. You better be quick, Time Lord." Take out the fact that the Doctor could have easily just hold it whilst Jade goes off running to the other side of the air duct to get the switch to put the shields back on. This scene really works greatly and dramatically. Jade, we don't spend a lot of time with her, but that's mainly because the episode, in a 60-minute format, has a lot to do and a lot of things to pick up upon. So the story spends as much time with Jade as much as it possibly can. So we do care about her, and sadly she then burns up and dies as the Doctor gets to one last twirl, and there's this really fantastic moment where the Doctor closes his eyes and then just steps forward. A lot of people have taken this as interpreted this as the Doctor basically taking a leap of faith. I, on the other hand, I take it as basically the Doctor's a Time Lord. He's a master of time. And when he's done doing this, he's focusing, he's feeling the rhythm of the wind, of the windmill. He's feeling the time slowing down, allowing him to take a deep breath, relax, and walk past through it. That's just such a fantastic scene, and the great thing about it is that the interpretation can go really anywhere. Now, before I go into the ending of this story, I want to talk about an element which is very prominent in the story, but I haven't actually talked about yet, and that is the humour. This story has a lot of humorous moments in it, from the aliens who struggle to understand human society, to Cassandra, who doesn't know much about Earth's history. She jokes about this pod, this egg, about how an ostrich has a wingspan of 50 feet and can shoot fire and can get resurrected. Basically, she's mixing up an ostrich with a phoenix, and then she gets a massive jukebox and mistakenly calls it an iPad. Interestingly to note, there's a joke in this where she refers to us, modern music, where we have Tainted Love and Toxic by, I believe it's ABC and Britney Spears. No, it's not Britney's ABC. Damn it, I can't believe I forgot that. That's really bad. And they call it, in the future, classical music. This is actually a joke that has been done before on Doctor Who, way back with Victoria and Ian Chesterton, where Victoria classes the Beatles as classical music. So, whether that was a reference to that, or whether the joke was just so obvious, I'm not quite sure, but the joke is there. And you've got the box of baboons spitting in people's eyes, and all these weird quirky aliens making noises, and the stewardess pretending to be calm, but then in real life he's this panicky sod of a man. The humour tries its best to be like Douglas Adams, a famous comedic sci-fi writer. And I don't think Russell T Davies succeeds here. I feel like the humour is played too much up in a way, to the point where it feels a little bit cartoonish, which really hurts the story, because the humour is a big element of this story. There's a lot of humorous elements, and it also jars with the much more really dark, serious moments like Jade's death, The Mox Balboon gets murdered. The stewardess gets murdered. The whole dealing with the Doctor and the Time Lord. The whole Rose looking at the last human and seeing just this horrible, disgusting, just prosthetics, just plastic and skin with no real human qualities to it. And it just doesn't, it jars so unbelievably that it just doesn't work in that sense. And it really knocks the story down. And it was one of the things I absolutely hated about this story when I first watched it. Going into it now and I understand more of the humour and stuff. You know, I do enjoy it. It gives me a little bit of, but nothing worth like screaming out laughing like. And it's more like light entertainment than more than anything, in my opinion. So yeah, the Doctor absolutely pissed because he's got the death of Jade, the stewardess, and now the Mox Balboon on his shoulders. He's just filled with rage. The part of the Doctor that was trapped in the Time War, this is the War Doctor essentially coming out in the 9th Doctor, as he's like, I'm alright, I'm full with ideas. They're teleporting with a massive amount of heat, needs a relay, and he puts the system back so that Cassandra comes back onto the ship after he saved everybody from its shields. And Cassandra's like, okay, well done. And she's kind of like, oh, you've won the test, you thing. And the Doctor's like, I'm not bloody playing. He just stares her down with just really intense, like, facial expressions. It's just like, people have died for your gamble for money. And she's like, okay, take me to court. See if you can beat me. And then she starts creaking. And we get one of probably the most darkest scenes to any Doctor Who story, which is, again, really jarring by how much humour has been in this particular adventure. But it really works out of context. This scene is so goddamn dark, but in a way which actually benefits from our characters, in which Cassandra is basically creaking up. She's coming in like a worm. And Rose begs the Doctor to save her. And the Doctor just basically proclaims everything has its time and everything dies. As Cassandra, or at least the body part, there's a chance she can survive because you see the brain in a jar. But the skin segment of her basically explodes as her last words are, I can't die, I'm too young. Despite her being like 100 years, basically she's obsessed with keeping like young and youthful. And that's her last thoughts, presumably from this story. And we get probably one of my favourite scenes in season 1, or at least one of my favourite scenes, in which the hall is completely empty and Rose is just looking at the expanded sun and all of these chunks of earth just rolling around, and she explains, like, after all this events, nobody was actually there to watch the world explode. All that history, and nobody was there to even, like, look at it. We were all focused on ourselves and we didn't even bother with it. The Doctor just says, take my hand. And he takes her off into the TARDIS and takes her to her own time, to modern day. And he looks at, and there's like a really optimistic future on, a viewpoint on the future of just, you know, everything's going to end one day. Why not just make the best of it? And it's here where the Doctor reveals, for he is a Time Lord, and his planet is gone, just like the Earth, what they've seen in the future. It was lost during a war, and he is now the last of the Time Lords. But Rose can smell chips, and so the story ends with the Doctor and Rose going for chips on a much nice, light-hearted tone, which really fits the adventure in a sense. So there you go. That's the end of the world. Overall, it's a complete mixed bag. It has some really promising moments, all the aliens, the settings. Euro Lynn is just a fantastic director, and there's some really great moments. I especially love his close-ups of Christopher Eccleston's face, especially that scene where he's in the air duct, when Jade is confronting him about his species and his planet of origin. Love that clip. Absolutely love it. But I feel like Russell T Davies was trying to do too much in a short amount of runtime. But not only was it too much, but it was also a little bit unfocused. As we got some really silly moments, really silly moments. And then we got some really dark, serious moments. And I feel like these elements shouldn't be really in the same story. Not to say that dark and light elements can't work in the same story, but these elements are so polar opposites. And also as well, I feel like the script, the actual narrative aspect of the story is incredibly weak as well. As I stated, Cassandra was such an obvious villain. Who else was it going to be? Let's be honest with ourselves. But you know, it's light, it's fun. The development of Rose in this story was actually well handled, which is really strange compared to her last adventure. And overall, I do recommend it. Maybe watch it once, but it's still a pretty decent story. So there you go, that's the end of the world. So join me next time where we then go into the past as we meet Charles Dickens and we get caught up in an adventure with ghosts. Just so happens to be in Cardiff. So join me next time for The Unquiet Dead, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!